Top War has released the angriest hero I have ever seen. She generates more rage than any other hero in the game, and it's not even close. But the thing that ticks me off is how somehow mastering the ability of throwing things by throwing stones at birds is somehow used in army logistics. I have no idea how those are connected, maybe just throwing supplies from one spot to another, but I think any of us could manage that. But while she was in logistics, she was on a mission to deliver tanks, and that order of tanks came under attack, so she decided to hop in a tank and kick some butt, and she has been a dedicated tank driver ever since. Moving on to her exclusive ability, Splash Explosion, there's a lot to her ability, so I'm going to break it down into 3 parts. The first part is her shield, the second part is how she generates rage, and the third part is what happens when she has enough rage and her ability triggers. The first part, her shield, is pretty easy. She gives all army units a shield equal to 35% of their health. Second, we have her rage, which makes things just a little bit more complicated. At the beginning of the fight, at max stats, she automatically generates 4 rage. However, you do have to have a minimum of 4 stacks of units to get that rage, because you cannot automatically generate more rage than stacks of units. In other words, if you have 3 stacks of units, she'll only generate 3 rage. So you need a minimum of 4 to get that maximum of 4 rage at the beginning. Not only does she have a head start, but after each one of your units attacks, you will get 1 rage, but there's a chance that you'll actually get a second rage. And as if that wasn't enough, when you generate 7 rage and her ability triggers, you will get 1 to 2 rage again. So you get rage at the beginning, you get 1 to 2 rage after each normal attack, and you get 1 to 2 rage each time her ability triggers. That is maddening. Finally, we figure out what happens when her ability triggers. First, once you've generated 7 rage, her ability will trigger and deal 250% damage to a random enemy target. Now the bonus is if that slot is completely eliminated and there's no enemy units in it after her ability triggers, it will also deal splash damage for an additional 45% for each unit it hits. Now the splash damage will affect any unit that is 1 square away from the stack of units that was defeated, in every direction, vertically, horizontally, and diagonally. Here's an illustration on how her ability affects other slots. By the way, this is what the hero looks like in the Japanese version of Top War, which is called Vivid Army. You'll notice that all the X's mark where the stack of units was eliminated, and all the red slots are where her splash damage affects. So if you manage to hit the corner, you can potentially damage 3 other units. If you hit the middle of one of the sides, you could potentially hit 5 other units, and if you get lucky and you hit the very middle slot, you can splash damage their entire march. But of course, that's only if you manage to destroy the stack with her ability. Now, as expected, she does gain additional attributes at exclusive level 3, 5, and 7. At level 3, she's able to give army units an attack increase of 30%. At level 5, after her ability triggers, instead of gaining 1 to 2 rage, you'll instead gain 2 to 3, which is just nuts. And the probability of gaining an extra rage after a normal attack is increased by 20%, so you have a higher chance of getting 2 rage after each basic attack instead of 1. I can definitely say her exclusive level 5 would make a huge difference to this hero. She would be triggering left and right constantly. And then at level 7, it will increase the damage of her splash damage by 30%. So instead of dealing about 50%, you're looking at about 80% per target affected by her splash. Now I'll go ahead and let this sand table play in the background with Optimus Prime, Megatron, and Cromwell, so you can compare their trigger rates as well as look at Cromwell's exclusive ability. And while this is playing, I'm going to go ahead and compare Cromwell to some other heroes. Now, Precise and Megatron, I believe, are the top 2 army heroes, so I won't include them in this comparison because they're definitely in the best army march. Instead, I'll be comparing Cromwell to May, Optimus Prime, and Katyusha. We'll start off by comparing Cromwell and May, and we'll look at their offensive capabilities first. Now, both of these heroes have a very similar trigger chance. However, when May triggers, she deals 100% damage to 2 targets, so a total of 200% damage each time she triggers, while also applying vulnerability to 2 targets. However, Cromwell is going to deal 250% damage when she triggers, not to mention the additional up to 360% damage she could potentially deal from her splash damage. So Cromwell definitely has the advantage when it comes to damage. Moving to their defensive capabilities, May has a 30% HP increase to army, where Cromwell has a 35% shield increase, and shield is much more effective than a regular HP increase, so Cromwell wins in the defense category as well, which makes this comparison very easy. May is out, Cromwell wins. Next up, we have Cromwell and Optimus Prime, and as you can see from my attack on the sand table, Optimus Prime has a significantly higher trigger chance than Cromwell. However, looking at their damage for each trigger, Optimus Prime is going to deal about 230% damage for each trigger, where Cromwell is doing 250%, plus that potential for extra splash damage. So while she does more damage for each trigger, Optimus Prime triggers much more often. However, all of these comparisons don't take into account the hero's equipable exclusive ability. However, if Cromwell did have her level 5 exclusive ability, it would definitely make the trigger chance significantly closer, and since Cromwell already deals more damage than Optimus, it could make them even in terms of damage. But it is hard to mark a winner here. Cromwell has the advantage of dealing more damage for each trigger, and also being able to trigger within the first round, where Optimus, you do have to wait for the second round, but he does trigger much more often. Moving on to their defensive capabilities, Optimus Prime is going to give about a 40% damage decrease to all your units, but only for the first round, where Cromwell is going to give you that 35% shield, and it's going to stay until it's depleted. So their defensive capabilities can be up in the air as well, because it could come down to how quickly are you taking damage. So an argument could be made that Optimus Prime is a better defensive hero, while Cromwell is a better offensive hero. But this matchup is a very close one to call and comes down to situational or whether or not you have their exclusive abilities. So I'm having a tough time calling this one. I'll leave it up to you guys. Lastly, we'll compare Cromwell and Katyusha. Katyusha does have a higher trigger rate and a higher base damage for her ability. Katyusha will hit multiple targets for a total of 340% damage, where Cromwell is only 250% damage. And while Cromwell technically can deal more damage because of her splash, the splash is likely not going to happen often enough to offset the difference in damage between these two heroes. So Katyusha is definitely going to deal more damage than Cromwell. However, Katyusha has no defensive capabilities, where Cromwell is going to have that 35% shield. So if you were building a glass cannon March, Katyusha is still going to be a good bet and an awesome hero, since you can get her for free. Cromwell overall, though, is going to be a better hero, particularly for PvP, since she has a good balance between offensive and defensive capabilities. So it'll come down to uses, but in most situations, Cromwell is likely going to beat out Katyusha. After comparing all these heroes, I think there are two army marches that potentially could be the best. The first one would be Precise, Megatron, and Optimus Prime, and the second one would be Precise, Megatron, and Cromwell. It is a tough decision because, as I mentioned, Cromwell and Optimus Prime are very close together, and it's likely going to come down on whose exclusive skill you have to what level. It also could come down to what you're going to use your army for. As I mentioned, Optimus is probably better in most defensive scenarios, where Cromwell might be better in offensive scenarios, but I'll leave that up to you guys. And if you disagree, let me know in the comments below. But thank you so much for watching. Thank you to everybody who subscribed, and as always, have a fantastic day.